Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I'm a single mom. My husband left when my son was 5, and it's been just the two of us ever since. I work full-time at a dentist's office, which means money is always tight, but we make it work. My son is 8 now, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me. He's a quiet kid, loves music more than anything else in the world. Last Christmas, I saved up for months to buy him a decent pair of earbuds because his old ones finally gave out. The look on his face when he opened that present made every extra shift worth it. That day at the store was supposed to be quick. I needed to grab some groceries and had been meaning to get myself some cheap earbuds since mine broke weeks ago. My son came with me because his babysitter canceled last minute. He had his earbuds in, listening to some cartoon soundtrack he'd been obsessed with lately. I was pushing the cart down the electronics aisle when this woman approached us. She had that haircut. You know the one. Short, angled, screaming for a manager before she even opens her mouth. Her whole vibe was aggressive, and she had this kid trailing behind her who looked miserable. She called me young lady and asked if I could give my son's earbuds to her son. She explained that he had forgotten his at home and really wanted to listen to some music. I turned around thinking she needed help reaching something. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking, but her face stayed dead serious. I asked her what she meant, confused by the bizarre request. She repeated herself, saying that her son needed the earbuds because he was bored out of his mind. I looked at her kid. He was staring at his shoes, looking like he wanted to disappear. My son had noticed what was happening and pulled out one earbud. I apologized but told her that those were my son's earbuds and he didn't want to give them away. Her expression changed instantly. Her eyes narrowed and her mouth twisted into this ugly sneer. She asked me if I was serious, then went on about how my son was being selfish by not giving them to her son. She said I should teach him better manners. My blood started boiling. I've dealt with rude people before, but this was something else entirely. I told her that these were his personal belongings and we weren't giving them to anyone. My son stepped a bit closer to me. He's shy, but he spoke up and said he didn't want to give his earbuds away. That's when everything went crazy. This woman's face turned red, and before I could even process what was happening, she lunged at my son. She reached for the earbuds, trying to yank them out of his ears. I immediately stepped between them and yelled at her to get away from him. She shouted back that he needed to learn to share. She actually shoved me aside, not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to get past me. Then, and I still can't believe this actually happened, she grabbed my son around the waist and lifted him off the ground. My son started crying immediately. She was shaking him, actually shaking him while screaming at him to give her those earbuds and calling him a little brat. I saw red, pure, blinding rage. I grabbed her arm and tried to pull her away, but she had this death grip on my kid. I yelled at her to let go of him right now. She screamed back at me to let go of her instead. She kept shaking him. My baby was screaming now, tears streaming down his face. I looked around desperately and saw my shopping cart a few feet away. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed that cart and rammed it straight into her side. She went down hard, finally releasing my son. He ran to me and I held him tight while he sobbed into my shoulder. Karen was on the ground, shrieking like a banshee. A security guard came running over and asked what had happened. I told him that she had tried to steal my son's earbuds and had assaulted him. I explained that she picked him up and was shaking him violently. She screamed from the ground that I had attacked her and demanded that I be arrested. She kept yelling that she wanted me arrested immediately. The guard called the police. While we waited, Karen didn't shut up for a second. She kept screaming about how I was a criminal and her arm was broken and she was going to sue me for everything I had. When the cops showed up, she was still on the floor, making a huge scene. My son was clinging to me, still crying softly. The officers separated us. One talked to me while the other dealt with Karen. I explained everything, though my hands were shaking. The officer asked me what happened next, and I told him that she had grabbed my son by the waist, lifted him up, and started shaking him violently. I explained that I tried to pull her off, but she wouldn't let go, so I used the shopping cart to knock her away from him. The officer nodded and wrote everything down. Meanwhile, Karen was yelling at the other officer, insisting that my boy had refused to share with her son. She claimed she was just trying to teach him a lesson and that I was the one who had assaulted her. The officer asked her why she had lifted the child. She became defensive and said she only did it to get his attention. She claimed he needed to learn to hand over those earbuds because her son deserved to use them. The officer told her that she needed to come with him. She refused, saying she wasn't going anywhere until I was arrested. The officer repeated that she needed to come with them now. She fought them the whole way, screaming and threatening to sue everyone. They eventually got her into the car. My son and I stood there watching. He was still shaking. I held him close and told him it was okay, that she was gone now and he was safe. A few days later, the police called. Karen had been charged with assault and disturbing the peace. The officer explained that even after being taken in, she continued to resist and make threats. Leaving them was no option but to press charges. I wasn't surprised. A few weeks after that, they called again. She'd pled guilty and got jail time plus a fine. The officer told me that she would be spending several weeks behind bars and would have to pay a significant fine for her actions. Part of me felt satisfied. Part of me just felt tired. My son still has those earbuds. He's okay now, though he was scared to go to stores for a while. I'm in my late 60s now, and after spending 50 years working retail, I figured I'd seen it all. I spent 38 of those years at ACE Hardware, so I know my way around gardening supplies pretty well. These days, my knees and back don't cooperate like they used to, which is why I was riding around in one of those electric mobility scooters at Walmart that day about a year ago. My wife and I had decided to try our hand at growing some vegetables, so we headed to the garden section to pick up supplies. I was wearing tan sneakers, beige slacks, and a blue t-shirt. Nothing special, just comfortable clothes for shopping. My wife had a regular shopping cart and we split up inside the garden section so she could go outside to grab some cow manure and the specific lawn fertilizer I wanted. I stayed inside to look for seed starting pots and a few other things. While I was browsing, I noticed a woman in the same aisle looking confused at the potting mix selection. She was in her late 20s and she must have overheard me giving my wife instructions earlier. She approached me politely, excusing herself first. She told me she knew I didn't work there, but that I seemed knowledgeable, and she asked if I could answer a question for her. After all those years in retail, I've never minded helping polite people, even when I'm off the clock. Plus, I genuinely enjoy talking to people. I told her sure and asked what she needed help with. She explained she was confused about which potting mix to buy. I asked her what she was planting and what type of pot she had. Then I walked her through my suggestions, explaining which potting mix would work best and why, what fertilizers to use, how much to water, and how much light her plants would need. We talked for about 15 minutes. She asked me how I knew so much about this stuff. I told her I'd worked for ACE Hardware for 38 years. She thanked me many times, loaded everything into her cart, and left the aisle. I grabbed my seed starting pots, put them in my scooter basket, and started to leave when I heard it. That unmistakable screech that could only come from an entitled person having a meltdown. I turned the scooter around to see a woman in her late 40s or early 50s. She had that typical short haircut, was dressed nicely, and stood there with her arms folded, tapping her foot. She demanded to know where I thought I was going. She complained that I'd spent forever helping the other woman, so now I was going to help her. Look, I spent 5 decades in retail. If a customer is polite, I'll bend over backwards to help them. If they're rude, well, when it was my job, I still had to help them. But this wasn't my job anymore, so screw it. I told her sorry, but I didn't work there. She accused me of lying and she insisted I worked there because I'd helped that other woman and was wearing the uniform. Then she asked why I was in one of those scooters, saying employees were supposed to be on their feet and walking, not using something made for disabled people. She actually put her hands on my scooter and tried to shake it. She told me I needed to get out of that thing and come help her right now. Now I was getting angry. I told her several things. First, that anyone who wears a blue shirt doesn't automatically work at Walmart. Second, that anyone who is polite and asks nicely, even if I don't work there, I'll try to help. But she was not polite. She started screaming, asking if I was going to help her or if she had to get my manager and get me fired. I shouted back at her, telling her the third thing, which was that I was using this scooter because my knees and back made it hard for me to walk and stand. Then she grabbed my wrist and tried pulling me off the scooter. She yelled that we were finding my manager and I was going to be fired. She yanked hard and almost pulled me and the scooter over. I managed to get her hand off mine with my free hand and pushed her back. She screamed, asking how I dared to touch her. She tried to grab me again, so I reached for my cane and yelled at her that if she touched me again, we would have a problem. She stopped, turned, and ran out of the aisle with her arms waving, screaming that some employee was trying to beat her up and demanding a manager. Right then, my phone rang. It was my wife asking where I was since we were supposed to meet in electronics. I briefly explained what happened and told her where I was. A minute later, here came the parade. Karen, the store manager wearing a yellow vest, an assistant store manager also in a yellow vest, two employees in blue vests, plainclothes security, and a female employee in a blue vest. I sat in my scooter with my arms folded while she pointed at me and yelled that I was the employee who threatened her. The manager asked if she meant this man here, the one on the scooter. She confirmed that yes, I was the employee, and she wanted me fired. I could see the manager and assistant manager exchange looks and roll their eyes. They knew they had a nutcase on their hands. The manager told her that I was not an employee and didn't work there. She insisted I did work there because she'd seen me helping another customer and I was wearing the uniform. The manager explained to her that everyone who wears a blue shirt is not a Walmart employee. Then she claimed that I'd said I was going to beat her up and that I'd tried to assault her. Wow. Now I tried to assault her. The manager took her to one end of the aisle while the assistant stayed with me at the other end. Security and the female employee went to check the security footage. They came back after 15 minutes. Security explained to the manager and assistant that he'd reviewed the tape starting from when I was helping a woman with potting mix. After she left, that woman had approached me and grabbed my arm, yanking on it and almost tipping me and the scooter over. I got her hand off me. She tried to grab me again. I picked up my cane, and that's when she ran away. The manager asked if I'd hit her with the cane. Security said no. The manager asked if I'd tried to assault her. Security said no. The manager asked why she would say that then. I suggested that maybe it was because I told her that if she put her hands on me again, we would have a problem. The assistant made a choking sound and one of the male employees started laughing and had to leave the aisle. The manager asked me if I wanted to press charges when the police arrived. I said yes. After another 5 minutes, 2 cops came in. The manager, assistant, security, and the cops went over to Karen. They trespassed her from the store and escorted her out to their police car. The store manager gave my wife and me a discount for our trouble, and we finished our shopping in peace. My cousin and I grew up together, more like sisters than cousins. We did everything together when we were kids, and that closeness never went away. When she had her son, he started calling me aunt, even though I'm technically his second cousin or something like that. I don't really care about the technical terms. He's my nephew, and that's that. A few years ago, my nephew was a toddler, and my cousin was going through a really rough time. She's a single mother, which is hard enough, but then my uncle got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Before that, my uncle had been watching my nephew while my cousin worked, but once he got sick, that obviously couldn't continue. My cousin had to put my nephew in daycare, but the cost was eating up most of her extra income. The daycare only kept him from 8:30 in the morning until 12:30 in the afternoon. After that, my cousin had no one to watch him, so she could only work half shifts. She tried asking the hospice agency that was helping with my uncle if they could watch my nephew for those 5 hours between daycare ending and her shift ending. But they told her that wasn't their job. They were there for my uncle, not for childcare. I was in college at the time, doing all my coursework online, so I had a pretty flexible schedule. One day during a conversation with my cousin, She mentioned how tight money was and how she could only work half days because of the childcare situation. I asked her what she did between 12:30 and 5:30, and she explained the whole problem. I told her I could pick up my nephew at 12:30 and watch him until she got off work. I explained that I could do my college work in the mornings, and the hospice workers would be with my uncle during that time anyway. We never talked about payment or anything like that. I just wanted to help my cousin out. She was so relieved and grateful. She told me this meant she could finally work full shifts and not worry about her son or her dad. For about 6 months, everything worked perfectly. My nephew was happy, my cousin could work, and I managed my schoolwork just fine. Then the daycare went through this massive staff change. They fired or let go a bunch of the older workers who had been there for years and replaced them with younger people who didn't seem to know what they were doing. Almost immediately, I started getting calls to come pick up my nephew early because they supposedly couldn't handle him. This made no sense to me. Before the staff change, there had never been a single problem. The daycare would call my cousin first, interrupting her at work, and then she'd have to call me to let me know I needed to pick him up early. Usually, they'd call around 11 in the morning. Every single time I got there, my nephew was just sitting there calm, looking confused about why he was being picked up early. On top of that, they kept forgetting to feed him lunch, even though lunch was included in what my cousin was paying for. My cousin had enough after a few weeks of this. She went and confronted the director about the situation. Turns out the director didn't even know they were sending my nephew home early all the time. My cousin demanded to be reimbursed for all the lunches they didn't give him and told them to stop calling her at work and call me directly instead. She pointed out that their constant calls could make her lose her job, which seemed counterproductive since she needed that job to pay them. The director agreed to reimburse for the missed meals and suggested I just start picking him up at 11 instead of 12:30. My cousin asked what complaints they supposedly had about my nephew, but the director refused to give any details, claiming she couldn't share that information because of client privacy. The reimbursement came out to $50, and they said the new monthly cost would be $150 less, so my cousin would be paying just over $600 a month. The math seemed off to us, but we didn't want to argue. I agreed to the new pickup time. That arrangement lasted maybe 2 weeks. Then I started getting calls at 10:50 in the morning telling me to come get him. I was usually already getting ready to leave when they'd call since the daycare was only a short drive away. After this happened a few times, I called them back and reminded them we had agreed on 11 o'clock when it came to the pickup time. That's when the director got nasty with me. She accused me of being late all the time and called my nephew a problem child. She said there were complaints from other parents, but wouldn't tell me what the complaints were about. I got the strong feeling they just didn't like my nephew, but were perfectly happy to keep taking my cousin's money. Then she threatened to call my uncle about the situation. I had to remind her that my uncle was dying of cancer and that calling him would be completely inappropriate. I explained that there wasn't anything he could do anyway in his condition, and it would just cause him unnecessary stress. She didn't seem to care much about what I said. Well, one day I actually was late, about 20 minutes late. It's the only time I was ever late, and I wish to this day I hadn't been. When I got there, I saw my nephew sitting outside the building by himself. No adult with him. The door was locked. I didn't see anyone looking out the window. My nephew was 26 months old, just over 2 years old, sitting outside alone. I was absolutely furious. I picked him up, put him in my car, and then I waited. I waited to see if anyone would come out to confirm that I was the person who was supposed to be picking him up. 5 minutes went by, nothing. Nobody came out, so I left. When I got home, I called my cousin to tell her what happened. She told me something even worse. The director had actually called my uncle after talking to me earlier that day. The director told him that my nephew had been hurting other children and that there were parent complaints that my cousin and I were refusing to deal with. Neither of us had ever heard anything about this before. I took my nephew over to my cousin's house. My uncle had calmed down some and was relieved to see my nephew was okay. I asked the hospice worker why she had given my uncle the phone, and she explained that she was upset too. She told me the director made it sound like there was a medical emergency. She said she couldn't reach my cousin or me, and the director claimed she was calling my uncle when she was left with no other choice. The hospice worker told me she felt violated and lied to by what the director had done. She had even called her supervisor because she didn't know how to handle the situation beyond calming my uncle down. My cousin left work early and got there about half an hour later. The hospice worker had just gotten a call back from her supervisor and put it on speaker so my uncle and I could hear. My nephew was watching a movie and wasn't paying attention to the adults talking. The supervisor was on the line and she was just upset like we were. She told us she had a son about the same age who went to daycare every day, so she understood the situation. She was also upset because the daycare had involved my uncle unnecessarily and had upset him the way they did. Her first recommendation was to call the police and report child abandonment since they had left my nephew outside with the door locked. She then recommended reporting the daycare's behavior over the past months to social services, especially since they were receiving state and federal grants. She told us she was going to make a report to the insurance board herself because the daycare had contacted my uncle despite clearly having a preferred contact, and my uncle was supposed to be an absolute last resort. My cousin and I both made calls right away. I called the police and she called social services. The dispatcher taking down my police report commented that it would likely be a situation where it was my word against theirs, since the daycare would probably deny the allegation. Fortunately, I told her I had a dash cam that I had activated when I saw my nephew sitting alone. The footage was grainy, but the audio was decent. It captured my surprise when I turned it on, then me picking up my nephew, putting him in the car, and waiting for someone to come out before the dash cam died. The police department wanted a copy of the footage despite its quality to back up the report, which I gladly provided. My cousin was transferred several times until she reached the right county department to file her complaint. She discovered she was one of several people complaining about that daycare. The social services worker advised her to also contact the police about finding my nephew alone, which I was already doing. They told her they had already started an investigation and would add her complaint to the growing pile. My cousin took a couple of days off work to spend time with her dad and son. During that time, she asked my nephew if he wanted to go back to the daycare. He said no. When she asked why, he simply said they were mean. He didn't say much more, which made sense given that he was just 2 years old. I was about 2 weeks from my summer break from college and told my cousin not to worry about finding new daycare right away. I explained that I could take my nephew for full days during the summer, giving her time to find an alternative. After my nephew's few comments about the daycare and knowing what they were doing to the adults, we weren't going to make him go back there. One of my cousin's co-workers later told us about a county program that paid me $700 a month to watch my nephew, so my cousin wouldn't have to cover daycare costs. We did this until he started kindergarten 2 years later, putting extra money in my pockets while I finished my degree, and my cousin had a little more for bills and living expenses. The county, police department, and state insurance board each conducted investigations into the daycare. About a month after the incidents with my nephew, the daycare was shut down due to multiple complaints of egregious acts against children. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I can guess based on my family's experience. I'm not sure if any criminal charges were brought against the daycare or the director, but the district attorney contacted my cousin and me within a week of the daycare closing. They had wanted to speak to my uncle too, but he passed away about a month after the daycare was shut down and was too sick to do an interview when the district attorney was asking for one. The building sat empty for about 2 months before another group took it over and put in another daycare. While there have been no complaints against the new daycare, I am not putting my children there. My cousin didn't put her next 2 children there either. We will stick with family from now on. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.